Welcome to the Better Workday Podcast with your host, Niamh Moynihan. Whether you're employed by a large company, do contract work, or you're trying to put some structure around your personal business, there are going to be instances where you need to track your time. For many people, though, time tracking is seen as a nuisance that detracts us from doing the work itself. Niamh, why is time tracking important, and how can we make sure that we are doing it effectively?
Hello, and welcome back to the Better Workday Podcast. This week we are talking about time tracking. I love discussing this topic because there is so much to it. There are both pros and cons to time tracking, and when done well, it can really help you create a better workday. But when you're not doing it well, it can cause so much unnecessary stress and admin. So we really want to make sure that if you are doing it, you're doing it right. Now, I want to start by covering off a few different scenarios for time tracking, and then I'll get into what's good, what's bad, how I do it, and some practical tips if you want to get started. First of all, you might already track your time as a job requirement. There are quite a few jobs where you have to track time spent against, for example, different projects or different clients. And if you're in that job, then you've got very little say about whether or not you log your hours. It's part of your job requirements. But there are still things that you can do yourself to make sure that you can make the most out of the information in that timesheet. It's not just for the team report or the department report or whatever. You can use it to help your working week on a day-to-day basis as well. And we're going to get into that. And then there's a group of people who, like me, track time because they want to. So I track it because I want to. I like the information that it gives me and the decisions it allows me to make. So if you're in that bucket, then this is definitely the episode for you. First things first, what is time tracking? Time tracking is when you break down the hours that you spend at work into different categories. Some people break those into types of project. Others would bucket it by client. Others would look at it by type of work. And you track their time in minutes or in hours, and so that at the end of the week, you know how many hours you worked and where that time went. There's a lot of different ways to track your time. You can use specific software, and I'll put a link to one or two of those in the show notes if you want to check them out. You can use pen and paper, and you can just use a spreadsheet, which is what I use. It doesn't really matter what system you use if you are an individual doing it for yourself, as long as it works for you. And of course, if you're doing it as part of your job, the only thing I would say is don't track your time twice. Just put it straight into the system as opposed to going to save yourself double admin, and use the reports and the functions you can out of that tool as best you can. Time tracking is done on a weekly basis, usually, and I would always encourage people that if they are doing it, to do it real time or near time, which means that you either update your hours as you go along or you at least do it every day, because otherwise it gets really hard to remember what you're doing and when you were doing it. And once you start looking at time tracking, the next question is, what are you going to use that data for? And this is where we get into the pros and cons of time tracking and how to best do it so that it supports your workday and just doesn't cause unnecessary stress. When you track your time, you are recording where your time is going, what activities you are working on, and how much time you're spending on each of them. And this is very, very helpful if, for example, you are delivering a service to different clients and you want to know which of the clients is costing you the most in terms of hours. And if you are an employer, that translates into staffing costs. So it's really, really helpful. But what about when you're tracking it for yourself? Well, that allows you again to see what you're working on and how much time you're spending on each activity. So you can decide if you are focusing on the right things throughout the working day and the working week. Are you spending your time on the things that are most valuable, on the work that's going to help you achieve your goals, whatever they might be for the quarter or for the year? Now, when it's done well and when the information is shared in the right way with the right people, time tracking allows us to tweak and adjust how we spend our time week to week so that we're always moving closer towards our goal. For example, I don't work a linear week. I don't work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. I haven't done for a long time. So I work a little bit in the morning, a little bit during the middle of the day, and sometimes I work in the evenings, sometimes I work on the weekends. And this all allows me to work around my family and my husband and all those kind of things, which is great. But if I'm not careful, I could end up working a ridiculous amount of hours. Or on the other hand, I could end up not working enough in order to do what's needed to be done for my business. So by tracking my time, I'm able to see week after week how much I am working and where that time is going so that I can be mindful about what I'm focusing on so that I can pare back my hours if I need to, or indeed so that I can make sure I get more time in the business if I need to. So it really helps me to manage me and to manage my expectations about myself and of other people. What do I need from other people? So when you look at time tracking for yourself and maybe as a team, when it's used to make decisions like that, to know how much people are working, what the time is being spent on, do we need to spend more time in one area, less time in another area, it helps you make more informed decisions because now you're not kind of going on a gut feeling like, I feel I'm spending all my time doing X. You can say, I know I spent 6 hours last week doing X. And then the question becomes, is X a valuable activity? And this is where the discussion around your time really, really makes a difference. If you're tracking this by yourself, for yourself, the discussion is with yourself. So you do have to do some self-reflection or maybe have a chat with an accountability partner or a work buddy to tease it through. But either way you do it, once you have the hours, you have to ask the questions, right? Are you spending your time in the right way? Now, when it's done badly or when it's done wrong, it's really when it's micromanaged and the focus is on trying to find the flaws. What I mean by this, and I'm going to give you a really practical example, is way back about 15 years ago at this stage, I was responsible for implementing a new time tracking software. And it was for people who were on the road. So they were doing field deliveries. So the guys were driving around in vans and they had to do lots of different drop offs during the day. And so on paper, a day might have looked like, 3 deliveries in a certain order, and the route would have taken, we'll say, 8 hours. But in reality, it didn't always work that way. There might have been traffic, construction, roadblocks, delays, parts might have been not ready to be delivered, all these other things. And so the day wouldn't have ended up looking like how I, the organizer, expected it to be. And so the conversation wasn't then about understanding how the day was spent. The questions were all around, why didn't your day go as I planned? And that is a very dangerous place to get into as a manager, or even if you're looking at your own time, because you end up just looking at the flaws and spending all the time analyzing what went wrong instead of looking at how can you make adjustments to improve things tomorrow, next week, next month. So if you do consider starting to track your time, I would be very light on what you expect your output to look like. At the start, I would just track the time and see what happens. And then after a few weeks, you might be able to say, I think the week is going to look a little bit like